أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the most important questions that a person needs to ask themselves in their lives is the question of where am I going? Seems to be a very natural question that should come to everyone's mind in any situation that they're at. In fact, the Holy Quran points to this as well when it asks, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? The exact same question. Where is it that you're going? Where are you heading towards, O mankind? Now, like we said, this is a natural question that comes into someone's mind when they're put in a place where they don't know much about it. So if you were to imagine that somebody goes into a coma for a long time, usually when they wake up and they open their eyes, they're confused, they don't know what's going on. Things have changed, the people around them look different, the area around looks different. And that's where they ask the question, where am I? What's going on? And this is a very normal thing to do for a person who's confused. It's a similar thing for us as human beings, that when we come into this world, the most natural question that we need to ask is, where am I? What am I doing here? And where am I going? These are normal questions that we ask in any situation. Except that when it comes to us as human beings, there's one small difference. That as time goes on, the nature of the dunya is such that it pulls us into it like a web. And with time, we forget this question, this very, very important question that we've said that a person needs to ask themselves. As time goes on, we get drowned in the dunya and we forget to ask this question, where am I going? But then every now and then a situation comes about, an incident comes about which jolts us and sort of gives us a temporary waking up. And Allah puts these situations in our lives so that we can make use of them and get back on track and keep asking that question and align our movements based on that question. Because of course, naturally, once someone asks, where am I and where am I going, what's going on, once they find the answer to that question, they'll now start moving in that direction of where they need to be going. And thus we find that Allah puts these situations in our lives, be it the death of a family member or a friend or a difficult financial situation. Each of these situations helps us to realize and jolts us and wakes us up. And we find this in the famous hadith of the Holy Prophet as well, where he describes that final waking up, that final jolt, comes when a person dies himself. So he says, An-nas niyamun, that people are asleep, they're in a state of deep sleep and slumber. فَإِذَا مَاتُوا إِنْتَبَهُ, but when they die is when they wake up. It's a very interesting concept, and it goes exactly in line with what we've described so far, that this life has drowned us so much that we're in a state of sleep and ghaflat, a state of not realizing what's going on. But when we die is when we wake up and we realize exactly where we were, what was going on, and what we should have done. But alas, as the Quran mentions, it's too late then. But is everyone like this? No, the Quran teaches us that there are some people who are, as we like to call them, smart investors. The smart people invest at the right time. When we see people like this in our lives, there's so many examples of young or smart entrepreneurs who just seem to get it right at every point. Whenever they make an investment, it always comes into fruition. You find people like this, that they invest in the right things at the right time. They keep on seeming to get it right. Now we might call it luck, but if we're to think about it and if we ask them, it can't be luck that they're getting it right so many times, especially with all the risks involved. If you were to speak to them, then they'll tell you that they've thought about their actions. They've sat down, they've pondered, and they've planned, and based on their calculations that's when they've acted upon those things, and that's how they keep getting it right. So what's the right place for us to invest in our situation in life when we've come to this place where we've realized that this question of where am I and where am I going is so important, what is that important thing or that important place and that correct place for us to invest in? One short surah of the Holy Quran, which we recite almost on a daily basis, gives the answer to this in a very clear way. And this is Surah Al-Asr, where in the final verse, Allah says, Innal insana lafi khusr, in the second verse of Surah Al-Asr, that certainly all of mankind is in a state of loss. All of mankind? No, there's an exception. Illa alladhina amanu, except those who believe and have iman. Wa amilu salihat, but is having faith enough? No, they act upon the things, the good things that Allah wants them to act upon. Wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. And they collectively call one another towards truth and towards perseverance and patience. So the Quran teaches us that the correct place to invest in is the place where a person has iman and acts upon the righteous actions that Allah wants them to act upon, and then collectively as an ummah call one another towards truth and towards perseverance and patience. Each of these has a whole explanation, and a person can sit down and think about what the practical implications and applications of each of these four things that Surah Al-Asr is calling us towards can be in our lives, and where we can apply them. But like we mentioned earlier in one of the previous recordings, that this holy month, the month of Ramadan, is a great opportunity to strive to do these things, to do these good things. We mentioned that in the hadith we have that in this month, Shaitan is locked up and chained up. Doing good becomes easier, staying away from bad becomes easier. We only have our nafs to fight against, which is easier said than done. But if a person is to truly strive in this month, Allah opens the doors for them and it becomes easier. And we find this that in previous months or in other months, it's difficult to do good. Fasting is difficult, towards iftar time. We're constantly checking the clock, waiting for iftar time. But in the month of Ramadan, fasting becomes easier. In other months, praying namaz and mustahab namaz is something that we wouldn't naturally do unless if there is a special day. But naturally, it's something that wouldn't come to us. But in the month of Ramadan, reciting mustahab namaz and reciting extra du'as becomes easier. Reciting the Holy Quran in other months is something that we may do it at a very infrequent and very small and minuscule level. But in the holy month of Ramadan, we're able to finish the whole Quran in these 30 days. So doing good becomes easier. And in light of what we spoke about, investing in the right thing, which we mentioned, is amal salih and having patience and persevering and having iman. All of these things become easier in this month, which is a training ground for us. However, like we said in the investors, they don't just make decisions without thinking. It needs planning, and it needs good planning. In our case too, it's important to do these things, but to do them in the right amounts, in the right times. It shouldn't be the case that a person is, for instance, only focusing on their ibadah and thus not giving time to their family or their work or the other aspects of their life. All of these needs thought. A person needs to sit down, think about what the different aspects of their lives are. Ibadah, family time, sports, even. All of these things are different aspects of our life, and each of them needs catering to. In fact, when we hear the word taqwa, which we hear quite often, and when we think about it, the ulama teach us that taqwa is a very simple concept, which is doing the right thing at the right time. And hence, even for example, doing exercise or playing sports or going out with friends in a halal environment can become taqwa, if it's done in the right way, in the right amount, at the right time. For example, a person comes home after a long day of work, they're tired, they're with their family, they spend time with their family, they're feeling a bit exhausted mentally. Hence, they decide to go out with their friends in a halal environment. This in itself, because it re-energizes them to come back and give more time to their family and more time to their work and more time to their ibadah, in and of its own self can become an act of worship. If it's done, of course, like we said, with the right intention, the right amount, and at the right time. Thus, we've spoken about the importance of knowing where we're going in this life and how the Quran teaches us the right amounts and the right things to invest in, and how this month, the holy month of Ramadan, is a beautiful opportunity for us to invest in the correct things, where good becomes easier and staying away from evil becomes easier too. We pray to Allah to give us the opportunity to act upon the teachings of Islam and to increase ourselves in our taqwa by doing the right things at the right time. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.